Good morning. I'm here to speak to you today about our second lesson in the Schools and Colleges as Organisations unit. We're going to be looking at 2.1 first of all, and then I'll upload the 2.2 on when I've done that because I've got it already. So 2.1 is where we describe the roles and responsibilities of the people that work inside the school all of the time, well, most of the time. So we're talking here about the senior leadership team, the teachers, the support work, and you might be quite surprised to find how much time the governors spend working in the school as well. They're obviously not going to be there full time, but they do have quite a vital role to play, and they often can be seen pottering about the place. So if you open up your PowerPoint, I've labelled the slides again so you can follow where I'm going, and I'm going to be following where I'm going as well with my laptop, so it might look a bit strange. Okay, so when we think about the roles and responsibilities, the reason that it's useful to know about what everybody else is doing at the school, as you remember when we were talking about communication and professional relationships and how one of the ways that you can work well with other people is by knowing what your job is and what it isn't. And we talked about standing on people's toes and doing the photocopying and stuff and trying to be helpful, but actually that causing problems. So the more you understand about the whole structure of the school, the hierarchy of how it's run, it really helps to see where your role in a support position fits into everything else. It also helps you to understand who's in charge of what. So if there's something which you think is a problem, or you need some training or some help on something specific, or you've noticed something that needs to be reported to a member of staff, you'll have a better idea through understanding about the roles and responsibilities, who you need to talk to, and what you can do. Okay, so our next slide then is slide 3, and we're going to start talking about the governors. So I've written governors or academy trustees. They generally all call themselves governors. Most schools now are academies. So the technical word for the people who manage those are academy trustees, but generally they call themselves governors. They've got a really important role to play in schools. They are really involved in promoting sort of a vision for where the school's going. They are involved in implementing changes. So if there's a change in law or a change in way things are going to be done, sort of from government level, they will be talking to people in the local education authority and to the head teachers. They will sort of be a way of bringing information into the school. So they have a really pivotal role in all of that sort of thing. They're what's known as a critical friend to the head. So they support the head, but they will also challenge the head. There's quite an interesting YouTube clip that you'll see. I've written down what it is for you to have a look at about how that works. So they sort of take the head to account. I mean, also if there's any problems with the head, if there are complaints, it's the governors that will sort it out. They are also responsible for choosing heads, so they are, really quite a powerful role. They have a lot of responsibility with how money that comes into the school is spent, how budgets are done. It's a really important job, it really is. Looking at slide 4, what do they do exactly? So they meet 3 times a year at least as a full group. Normally a full group is 10 to 12 members. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been involved in a committee. If you've got a huge amount of people, it's impossible to get anything done. So 10 to 12 members is kind of roughly where you are. But within that whole committee group, they are also divided into small subgroups, and they will have different responsibilities for things inside the school, maybe like pastoral care, safeguarding, uniform policy, staffing. There'll be like maybe 2 or 3 governors who will meet together with other parts of the school to keep all that kind of thing going. So the main body only meets at 3 times roughly. They set objectives, priorities and targets for the school. So as a school as a whole, but also in their small groups, they maybe want to make some changes. They are involved in meeting parents. They are involved when students are excluded, and how money is spent and how buildings are maintained, things like that. They're extremely busy bunch of people, and apart from claiming their expenses, they do it voluntarily, which is extraordinary really when you consider the power that they have. So slide 5, who are these superhumans? So these people are elected onto the governing board, and you'll be aware of your own children's schools. Every now and then there'll be something that comes home in the communication bag about parent governors, do you want to join, or there's elections coming up and do you want to vote, that kind of thing. So the type of governors there are parent governors. So 2 or 3 members of the governing board will have children at the school, or will in the past have had children at the school. They like to have people who've got an active understanding of how the school runs and its ethos and that kind of stuff. So that's quite important. There'll also be staff governors. There'll be 2 or 3 members of those. The head will automatically be a governor. There'll also be 1 member of support staff, and that could be somebody in a supporting role like a TA or an LSA, or it could be a technician, it could be someone who works in the office. It's someone to sort of represent the other roles in the school which are non-teaching, which is quite an interesting and quite, they have a very different view to bring to how they feel the school is working. So I think that's quite a useful addition. You have co-opted governors, and these are local people from the community with a special skill set. So you may end up with people who are sort of financial advisors who come and help with the money side of things. People who work in human resources that can help with staffing, employment law, that kind of thing. You can have people from all different walks of life, really. People who've got like buildings experience. People bring a whole raft of information in, which really helps support the role. So sometimes people will be specifically sought out for what they can bring to the school. They don't always wait for people to offer. Then there'll be authority governors, and these will be representatives of the local authority. And then there'll be foundation, partnership and sponsor governors, and these will be representatives or sponsors of the organisation. So if it's a faith school, you'll have maybe a religious leader there, or if it's an academy which is getting money from a business, that can happen, then there'll be a representative from that. So if it's a special school, then you might have some additional staff, additional governors with that kind of expertise. If it's a free school with a special interest in something specific, you'll have somebody there to represent that. So a whole different range of people. So the next clip is next slide is 6, which is the Rochdale Borough Council clip, and it's a head teacher talking to a school governor about their role, and you get to sort of see the kind of relationship. It's quite useful. Okay, moving on, the senior management team or the senior leadership team, SMT and SLT, you'll see that written down as. So colleges call their most senior member of staff the principal, and schools it's the head, but the senior leadership team in both cases will be most senior members of staff and with lots of different areas of expertise who will work together with the head teacher in terms of running the organisation, setting targets, that kind of thing. They meet very regularly. In some cases they meet every day. They certainly meet at least once a week. Again, like the governors, they will have individual areas of responsibility, things like monitoring newly qualified teachers, looking at the curriculum, if there are some pastoral issues that they need to talk about. So they kind of get together regularly to talk about how it all runs. And the SMT is going to be different sizes depending on the different size of the school. So you might have a very small management team for a very small primary. Some of the large colleges and secondary schools, can be quite large. Okay, SENCOs. SENCOs are absolutely an essential role in the schools, and particularly going into a supporting role, particularly if you find yourself being a learning support assistant. The SENCO will be the person that you speak to in day to day about how you can support children, the most. You have a very close working relationship with them. So SENCOs are experienced teachers to start with. They also have to do an additional master's degree in special educational needs provision, and often you will find SENCOs who have worked in schools as a teacher and then take on the role and then take on the masters while they're doing the role. It's pretty challenging. They're responsible for all the special educational needs children's progress and the support that they receive. So they manage LSAs and the ELSAs, the emotional literacy support workers. They also have an important job with liaising with external professionals. So if there's a concern about a child, a teacher might notice something, or a teaching assistant, they'll speak to the SENCO. The SENCO will maybe observe, speak to the child as well, might call in an educational psychologist, or might call in a CAMS advisor. They will have really good understanding of issues that children might be having. They will liaise with people like social workers. If a child comes into school and has ongoing difficulties with hearing or speech or something like that, then they will ensure that that kind of help and support is continued in school. If something is noticed for the first time, then they will have an assessment by an occupational therapist. So the SENCO is a really important person for bringing people in, having the expertise to know what might be useful, and then finding the professionals to match up with that. They are usually pretty busy, has to be said. It's a legal requirement that every school has a SENCO. In some cases, if they're very small schools, you can have a SENCO that shares schools, but that's unusual. You really, in terms of the most important roles in school, you have your head teacher, your deputy head teacher, your designated safeguarding lead, and your SENCO as being the 4 most important roles. There's a fantastic clip, it's quite a long one actually, 14 minutes, a day in the life of the SENCO. The woman who is the SENCO in this school in London is just like Wonder Woman. You'll enjoy that. She's incredible, the things she does. She does look exhausted, but then you would, and she's got a little boy. Okay, moving on to slide 10. Teachers and tutors. I'm not entirely sure why they have given you the 2 terms of teachers and tutors. So I thought I'd unpick them. So teachers are employed by colleges and schools to deliver a specific curriculum. They usually have large classes. They're educated to a specific level. Tutors are often self-employed and deal with smaller groups. So it's very common for secondary schools to employ English or maths tutors that come in and will see children, maybe 2, 3, 4 in a group, and they have the opportunity then to really tailor the help that they're giving. They will do that for maths, English, and sometimes science, which is seen to be the core subjects if children are really struggling. They're not always educated to the same level as teachers, but they generally are. They work independently. Sometimes they'll work on a sort of a one-to-one. Sometimes they're paid for by parents, but looking at people working in the school, then they usually are brought in by the school, short-term contracts to work with specific children and to help to sort of bring them up to speed. So the roles and responsibilities, if you look at slide 11, so some of the obvious things: recording learner progress and recording any specific needs students might have, and making sure that you are using resources that they can access. Working with the school's policies and procedures about all of the many policies and procedures we've looked at, promoting equality, diversity, inclusion, ensuring the health and safety of pupils. So you remember all the things we did about risk assessments and making sure things are safe in the classroom. Meeting parents to discuss concerns and pupil progress, that's a big part. Contributing to the work of the school, so helping with things like concerts, sports day. There's quite a high expectation that you're going to be really stuck into all aspects of school life. And contributing to the school and the college team, so being a real sort of team player in terms of working in committees within the school, working with your department, working well as to try and promote a really sort of positive feeling within the school. Some members of staff have additional responsibilities, and when teachers start, so when you have your first year of teaching, you just get to do the teaching. The minute you can manage that, then they're quite keen for you to take on other things. There's an awful lot of work to be done in the school, and you can see how you can sort of progress up through the levels of teaching, by taking on additional things, becoming head of department, head of curriculum, head of year groups, head of progress, all that kind of stuff. It's quite an interesting career path for and ambitious teachers. They'll move schools, they'll go to bigger schools, more challenging schools, get different sorts of experience. It's quite common for people to to look at where they want to be heading and make some quite big changes to try and get up the ladder. If you really want to be a head of department, but the head of department where you work is not showing any signs of shifting, then you have to sort of shift. So it needs to be quite a lot of teachers will have quite a lot of movement in their teaching careers. In further education colleges, you will also have associate teacher roles, ATLSs, who are working towards full teaching qualifications. And again, like the NQTs, they don't have so much responsibility. They're kind of learning, they're being mentored. It's quite common to see them in colleges. The next clip is a day in the life of a secondary school teacher, a modern foreign languages teacher. You might be quite interested in that. It's quite useful. She says that if you're thinking about working in a school, go and hang out in a school for a bit, because there's often people think it's their dream job, and then when they get there it can be quite different. So some quite interesting things. Okay, support staff. So there's a wide range of other roles which support the work of schools and colleges. I've listed on this slide, we've got the office and admin staff, the site staff like the caretakers and site managers, Steve. There's the pastoral staff, the counsellors, the mentors, specialist staff, the computer, science and art technicians. And then in bold, look, the STLS, the supporting, teaching and learning staff, which are the teaching assistants and the learning support assistants. Let's have a look at them. So people are often quite confused by the difference between the two roles. So the next slide is going to be a brief overview. It's probably best understood as teaching assistants being sort of like the right-hand man of the teacher, helping out generally all over the classroom, helping with displays, helping with resources, with planning, all different sorts of things. And TAs are more commonly found in primary schools than secondary schools. Learning support assistants, rather than working with one teacher, they will be working with one or several students and will follow them throughout their school day, enabling them to join into lessons where they can, adjusting resources to make them fit the child's ability. And learning support assistants, depending on the school, there can be a really large body of people. I've worked in classes where there's been a teacher and maybe like 4 learning support assistants in a really challenging class. It really varies depending on the intake. Okay, so slide 15 gives us the 2 different columns. So teaching assistants are managed by the teacher. So when you are a teacher in the class, you're responsible for all the adults there, and so if the teaching assistant's got any issues or problems, then they will go to the teacher that they're working with. Teaching assistants provide help and support. They are involved in producing resources and displays, organise small groups that need more challenge as well as more support, and help with planning. Learning support assistants are managed by the SENCO of the school, so that's who they will report to. They work with key groups of children, one-to-ones, sometimes, or just all small, small little clusters, and they move through the school. So sometimes you will work just with one child all the time, sometimes you'll work with a group, sometimes you will shift depending on the size of your school. LSAs need to adapt materials for pupils to be able to understand and access what's going on for them. It's quite common to go into a lesson and think this is not really going to work out for this child, and have a conversation with the teacher and then do something sort of similar along the lines. So the more time you spend in classrooms, the better it is. You need to sort of know the curriculum, where they need to be heading, For some children, they're never going to be fully access the things that other children are going to be able to do. So you have to find ways to make the work interesting and relevant without putting them under undue pressure or making them feel that they're not going to be successful. Quite a challenge. LSAs often work on specific areas of need in small groups, so things like social skills, so you might also be expected to run like social games groups, behaviour management, resilience workshops, that kind of thing. Lego therapy, so quite a useful thing for children to help with you know, working in teams, working together if they have specific areas. Often autistic learners, you know, really struggle in those areas. So there's quite an expectation that you can be quite flexible to provide what's required. The next slide, slide 16, is a teaching assistant relationship slide. And it deals with a teacher that's been working with a teaching assistant for some time. You might find that quite interesting. And then the last slide is learning support at college. So learning support at college is quite different from learning support at schools. They are useful, really useful in helping groups of students deal with like planning, managing their work, accessing resources, using technology. It's usually more of a hands-off relationship, where students are have to take a bit more responsibility to forging these things. So it's a slightly different setup. But anyway, the clip should give you some more information. Okay, so that is a whistle-stop run through 2.1. I will see you later for 2.2.